Okay, so guys, I don't know what happened there. I hope you're back with me. I lost contact there for a few minutes, so please let me know if you're back with us again. Okay, that's great. My apologies about that. So I want you to join me today for an interactive whiskey tasting. Okay, as I said before, I used to do whiskey tours all over Dublin. I've worked in the hospitality industry for over 20 years in the food and drinks business, and whiskey is my passion. As I said, I'm Irish, and it's part of our history, our heritage, and our culture. Okay, I love taking people around Dublin City, talking about whiskey and talking about my favourite pubs and my favourite whiskies. Whiskey has been around for a long, long time, and I'm delighted to have you here with me today. This is obviously going to be the future, talking to people online, and I'm going to try and make it as interactive as possible. So without further ado, I'm just going to start basically with the history of Irish whiskey, how it originated, and as I said, I'm no expert, but I'm passionate about Irish whiskey, and I'll tell you about my experiences, what I have come across over the last 25, 30 years, and I've inherited from my father and my grandfather, who are involved in the whiskey industry and the drinks industry as well. So they have some great stories to tell, and hopefully I can pass them on to you as well. Okay, with maybe a bit of a modern twist, because there's been some great innovation with Irish whiskey, particularly over the last 5 or 6 years. You know, veering away from more traditional methods and being a bit more creative. So as I said, Irish whiskey has survived. It survived famine, it survived war, it survived prohibition, so it'll survive COVID-19, right? So I really look forward to seeing people again in real life, but I'm glad you're here with me today, and we'll start just with the brief history of Irish whiskey, and what is whiskey? What is whiskey and how it's actually made? Well, whiskey is very simple. It's made from barley, usually our grain. The barley is malted. Ireland in particular, and Scotland, but I would say Ireland has fantastic barley. It really suits the climate, and then the barley is malted. So you use malted barley, water, and yeast. And essentially, what you do then is you make a type of beer, which is called. It's brewed up. You put the barley in, you malt the barley, and how you malt the barley is you add water to it, kind of hot water, and you trick it into growing, and then it starts to germinate. And when it germinates, these lovely little green seeds appear, and then you dry it. So it's usually dried in in Ireland we dry it in a kiln, and in Scotland they smoke it. So then when it's dried, it forms a kind of a flour called grist, and then the grist then is put into a big tun, and they add water, and then they add yeast, and then this forms a type of beer called pig's ale, which is about 9%. So essentially, what whiskey is, it's distilled beer. Now, it's not initially called whiskey until the first distillation. And how do you distill it? Just distilling is essentially when you heat the beer up and it vaporizes. So it vaporizes for the first time. You distill it once. It's not whiskey. It's not a spirit the first time. It's called a low wine at 25%, and then it's not until the second distillation then that it forms a spirit, which then is they usually use the middle cut of the spirit. Which is obviously up to the master distiller to pick this section out, and he picks then the middle cut, and then it is put into, to be called whiskey, it has to be put into a wooden cask, either oak or Spanish, European oak, or American oak. So we usually use sherry barrels or bourbon barrels. The sherry butts are slightly bigger, and then the bourbon barrels are slightly smaller, about 200 litres. And this is what gives it the wonderful flavour to whiskey. It's the wood. This is where the secret. This is where the magic happens. The magic. It's not very exciting up until that, but then when it's put into wood for a minimum of 3 years, then it can be called whiskey. Okay, when it comes back out. 3 years, is it good? Well, you know, it's okay. It's not really till it ages in the wood from 8 to maybe 10, 12 years where the real magic happens, and all these wonderful flavours come out of the wood, you know. So like they've been doing some really interesting things recently where they finish different whiskies and all sorts of, you know, unusual woods. Method and Madness finish it in a French Limousin, which is in the Cognac district, and it gives a very unusual kind of flavour to the whiskey, you know. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to basically pick the whiskies that kind of cover each different style of whiskey. So essentially what you have is you have malt whiskey, which comes from barley. You have grain whiskey, which comes from sort of corn, rye or maize. And then you have pot still whiskey, which is unique to Ireland. Ireland is the only country in the world that kind of uses pot still whiskey. What is pot still whiskey? Pot still whiskey is when they use malted and unmalted barley. How did this arise? It was actually for a reason that they didn't want to pay tax. There was tax on malted barley, so they decided to put in unmalted barley to pay less tax. And then they found out it gave a wonderful, spicy kind of a flavour to the whiskey. So this remains unique to Ireland, and it's called pot still whiskey. And the texture of the whiskey is a lot kind of oilier as well. One of my favourites, I have to say. So then you have malt whiskey, grain whiskey, pot still whiskey, and then any of them can be blended. Blending is most popular way of making whiskey now, and we'll give that to the Scots. The Scots are the creators of blending. Blending started in about 1850. So before that whiskey wasn't blended. It was usually pot stilled, or just they used malt or grain whiskey. But most, like even Jameson, the lovely Jameson that we get today, the Jameson is a blend. Bushmills is a blend. A lot of whiskies are blended now, you know. So just to describe the different styles, as I said, you've got malt, grain, pot stilled, and then blended. Okay. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to try and take you through all the different styles from right from the start and then up to kind of more modern ways of making whiskey. So the first one we're going to try today is Bushmills. Okay, so it has 1608 on the bottle. This is when they were given a patent to make whiskey. They didn't in fact start making actually whiskey till 1784, but they put 1608 on the bottle. In fairness to Bushmills, it's a wonderful distillery. It comes from the north of Ireland. They have a great history. It's a wonderful place to go. I'd highly recommend it. Very historical, and on top of that, they make very good whiskey. So we'll just try this, okay? Now, I'm just going to show you a couple of glasses that you drink whiskey from. These type of glasses are called a rocks glass, and sometimes you get whiskey in it. It's not good for tasting or nosing, okay? But you do in pubs, unfortunately, they give you these glasses. Then you've got a more traditional glass here. This is kind of an old Irish whiskey glass. Still very wide at the top. Not too bad for nosing, but still too wide. Then we have the Glencairn one, which is very good. Narrow at the top. Good for holding, good for nosing. And then even we have a modern Irish one called a Tua glass, which is probably my favourite. So a lot of it is to do with, when you nose the whiskey, it's to do with the size there, how the air and the whiskey come out together. If it's too wide, there's too much oxygen around. If it's too narrow, there's too much alcohol going up through your nose. So this, in my opinion, is probably the best size, to be quite honest with you. So what we do is we start off with Bushmills, okay? I have to say Bushmills is one of my favourites, okay? Price-wise, it's like €33. I drink it in my local pub, they'll tell you. It's a great entry-level whiskey, and it's just full of those wonderful, wonderful sherry flavours, okay? As I said, whiskey is usually aged in a sherry cask or a bourbon cask, okay? Sherry is probably slightly stronger, dried fruit, Christmas cake, all this type of stuff, okay? So I'm just going to try this. So you nose it. There's those wonderful Christmas cakes, spicy Christmas cake, caramel, all that sort of stuff. I even have some cake here. So this type of cake, fruit cake, spiciness. You've got nuts, you know, these kind of hazelnuts, all that sort of stuff going on. You might even have a bit of coffee, and all those like wonderful flavors in the whiskey. So as I said, you look at the color. It's kind of a dark color because of the sherry, and then nose it. You've got all that lovely Christmas cake spiciness, and then let's taste it. Spicy fruit, smooth caramel, toffee. It's just a great whiskey. Like for value for money, it's very hard to go wrong. Okay, I like it. Now, for old style's sake, the next one I have is Kilbeg, which is actually the oldest distillery in Ireland. It dates back to 1757. They actually made whiskey in 1757. Bushmills did not make whiskey till 1784. So Kilbeg has a very special place in Irish whiskey history. It was bought by John Teeling in the 80s. And it continues to operate today, owned by Beam Suntory. But not to worry, they still make whiskey there, and it's a very historical. It's like a little museum. So the reason I brought this along was just to. It's similar to Bushmills in terms it's a blend, but it's aged in a bourbon barrel. Okay, so it's just to even see the color. So to nose it, it's quite light. It's not a particularly old whiskey, probably about 8 years old, light, fragrant. So because it's aged in bourbon, what you tend to get is bourbon kind of has more flavors of kind of pear and apple. Where do we have them here? We have a pear, if you like pear, and we have apple, if you like apple. So pear and apple are the predominant flavors of the Kilbeg. What does it taste like? Very, very smooth. Irish whiskey. There's kind of probably a bit of honey in it. So we've got honey. If you can see that. Nice bit of honey, pear, apple. Kind of light, you know. Probably not too exciting. But it's a nice, light, well-rounded Irish whiskey, and it's Kilbeg. You know, so Kilbeg is, as I said, it's the oldest distillery in Ireland. There's Roe and Co. And Kilbeg are the two oldest distilleries, but Roe and Co. closed down. More Kilbeg kind of trundled on through the years, so it has a special place in my heart, I have to say. So another whiskey we're going to try today is this one here. It's called Connemara 12. Now, not everyone's cup of tea. No, it's not, but it's a particular favourite of mine. Why? It's actually made in a kind of Scotch style. It's slightly peated, not heavily peated, not near the Lefroy level. The peat levels in it are quite low, and we're just going to try that now. I recommended this to a friend of mine, good old Alex Sapenzia, my good Italian friend, and it's his favourite whiskey. So, okay, when you nose this, you're going to get smoke, okay? Nowhere near Lefroy or any of those heavy ones, but it's smoky, right? And sometimes people go, oh, it's very smoky, oh, I don't like the smell. Okay, get through the smoke, but when you get through the smokiness to some lovely aromas of, there's definitely like orange peel, honey, what else do you get? There's definitely orange peel, honey, a bit of lemon maybe, lemon and lime, and then maybe a slight bit of vanilla. Do I have vanilla here? Vanilla somewhere. Vanilla. So there's vanilla definitely in that. Vanilla has a wonderful smell. I love vanilla ice cream, I have to say. So, yeah, where are we here? Okay, smoky, vanilla, orange peel, citrus fruit. Okay, that's how this is the 12-year-old now. Very smooth, lightly peated. The flavour keeps coming through. Very well balanced. I have to say I like this whiskey. It's one of my favourites. You know, not everyone's cup of tea, but I have to say, if you want to try it, it's an introduction into the heavy scotches, shall we say, you know. Yeah, good old favourite of mine. Now, next on the list is the more innovative. We're going to go for a bit of creativity here, okay? This is a Method and Madness range, which comes from the Middleton distillery in the south of Ireland. This bottle would be about €50 in price, okay? €50. Now, I really, really like this brand in terms of innovation. You know, a lot of Irish whiskies are obviously a lot more traditional. This, even look at the bottle, the shape of it, the design, it's pretty cool. But not only that, it's not gimmicky. The whiskey in it is first class. It comes from the Middleton stable of, it's like horses. It's a bloody good stable. It's a wonderful whiskey down there, and they're allowed to be a bit creative. Method and Madness, you know, where there's method is madness. They respect tradition, but at the same time, they're allowed to be a bit creative. You know what I mean? Just like kind of mess with a few little flavors that maybe you're not supposed to. So, for example, they use all sorts of different woods. Where are we here? Okay. So, as I said, there's the grain whiskey, which this one is, and then there's the malt whiskey. So this is a grain whiskey. It's unusual for Middleton to. I mean, most of the whiskies down there they use malt, you know, which comes from obviously from barley. But this is a grain whiskey. So in fairness to this whiskey, you can see it here now. It wins best Irish grain whiskey. I think it's won at like 2017, 2018, 2019, and there's a reason why, because it is quite special in terms of grain whiskey. Okay, so it has the tasting notes on it are very unusual. They say like pencil shavings, but it has a lot more, say, pine, rose petals, pine, pencil shavings. If you can get pencil shavings, but definitely the rose, the pine, and there's certainly a certain amount of fruit in it as well. And this is slightly stronger. It's 46%, which you'll notice when you take a swig out of it. There's kind of cinnamon in there as well. Okay, it's dry, it's fruity, it's floral, there's pine, there's toasted oak, there's peeled even, bit of grapefruit in that. That kind of nice grapefruit bitterness in it. There's a few nice little things going on in that whiskey. The Kilbeg was just kind of a bit more one-dimensional. This thing has little nice little things, just little things flicking at you, you know, which I really like, you know. So for innovation, unusual taste of whiskey, I have to say the Method and Madness range surpasses most in terms of innovation, you know. And I really like that because it's a grain whiskey. Am I a fan of grain? I prefer malted whiskey myself. Grain is the kind of poor man's whiskey, shall we say. Yeah, that's the Method and Madness one. And as I said, that would be retail at about €50, which, you know, it's not going to break the bank. Yeah, it's just a nice. They've a lovely range of whiskey. They win a lot of awards, and deservedly so, to be quite honest with you, right? So, another thing I'm going to try to do today is there's a nice thing to do with whiskey because it's so strong, is try and mix it with some cheese. Okay, so this cheese I'm going to use is it's a cheddar cheese. It's from the south of Ireland in Tipperary, and it comes from Sheridan's Cheesemongers, and it's called Durg cheddar, right? So just if you want to contrast that, particularly with, say, Connemara or any other ones, the smokiness, cheese really works well, okay? So we'll just try this with, say, the Durg cheddar with the Method of Madness. The two flavours complement each other. the strong alcohol taste is negated by the wonderful, strong flavour of the cheese. I do with a lot of American people, and they love this jerk cheddar. It's kind of like Parmesan. Really salty, strong, bitter taste with the whiskey, I have to say. Okay. And then we have another one here. It's called Goobeen Smoked. Okay. This comes from Cork, Skull and Cork. Very smoky cheese, but with the Connemara. We'll try it with the Connemara. We've still some of the Connemara left. Okay. Okay, you've got the smoky whiskey and the smoky cheese, right? The flavours contrast each other wonderfully. The smoothness of the whiskey, the strong alcohol, and then it's just negated by that lovely, creamy, smoky, salty cheese. Really even helps with the digestion of the whiskey and the cheese. So if you haven't tried whiskey and cheese before, try it. It's quite good, I have to say, honestly. So I'm not sure what time we are at the moment. I don't want to run out of time. No, we have a couple of minutes left. So I'm going to finish on one of my favourites, if not my favourite Irish whiskey. Because, as I said, there's malt whiskey, grain whiskey, blended, and then there's pot still whiskey, okay? So this is Redbreast 12. I'm a massive fan of Redbreast, okay? So Redbreast is pot still whiskey at its best. As I said, what is pot still whiskey? Pot still whiskey is made from malted and unmalted barley. The Redbreast is the kind of quintessential Irish whiskey, to be quite honest with you. As I said, this one is the 12-year-old. It's 100% pot stilled, made from malted and unmalted barley. What else is there to know about it? It's really the benchmark of Irish whiskey. But another interesting thing about it, so they use malted and unmalted barley, but then they use sherry casks and bourbon casks, okay? So for 2 sherry casks, they use 1 bourbon. So it's 2 sherry to 1 bourbon. So it's kind of like a marriage made in heaven, really, to be quite honest with you. So let us have a go. Okay, for all still with me in this little pub, Gibney's in Malahide. As I'm socially distancing, there's no one around, I can assure you, unfortunately. Okay, so I'm drinking this in it's like a sherry glass, but they're quite good. Like it's like a whiskey glass. So they're very good for tasting. You can swirl it around. There's a nice width to the top of the glass as well. So to nose it, perfect. You know, it has those wonderful Christmas cakes, spicy, cinnamon, all those wonderful flavours and smells. Powerful stuff. Okay, now let's taste it. Okay, when you taste Redbreast, it's an infusion of flavours. There's so many flavours coming there. And if you talk about it compared to wine, length and wine, it's got so much length. The flavour just keeps coming in your mouth, it stays in your mouth. I can still taste that in my mouth. I put it down a couple of seconds ago. Those wonderful sherry flavours are just like coming through. As I said, you've got all this kind of wonderful kind of Christmas cake, fruit cake, spiciness. You know, you've got like there's a spiciness to it as well, because when they use malted and unmalted barley, from the unmalted barley you do get a kind of spiciness, you know. Another thing about pot still whiskey, it's quite oily. There's an oiliness to it. So if you just have another drink. Swirling around my mouth, it's very oily, very buttery, very creamy, very caramel, very spicy. It's I highly recommend it. So it's available. It's at €60 a bottle, and for €60 you're essentially buying a piece of Irish whiskey history, in my opinion. you can't go wrong with Redbreast 12. It's just got a complex, spicy, fruity, creamy coffee, multi-layered attack of all sorts of flavors. You know, I'm not being biased. I'm an independent whiskey drinker myself. I've no affiliation with them, but it's one of my favorites. So that's about it, guys. I don't know how many of you are there, but it's nice to have people along. It's nice to be able to talk about whiskey. And as I said, I'm thankfully working with the Gibneys here, and if the whiskey is available on Gibneys off license in Malahide, County Dublin, and I have to say thank you to www.staycurious.tours as well, which have been very helpful and helping people like me who are tour guides go online and talk about what we're passionate about. Okay, so I hope this has been some value to you, and if you want to maybe send some questions or emails afterwards, I'll try and answer them. I'm not sure how that works, but you can certainly log into the Stay Curious account and I will answer any questions you want. Okay, so thank you very much for joining me. It's been a pleasure and I hope to see you soon. Okay, see you. Bye. I'm not sure if any of you want to ask me any questions, but I'm not sure if I can answer them online here. Maybe try, but I'm not sure whether it'll work.